Hello, welcome to Rabbit Holes with Aaron. I am Aaron, a retired Marine, and a lot of other things. I basically have a problem sitting still for the most part. And with me today, I have my guest, a friend who's like a sister to me. Her name is Deborah Rogers. Yeah, we go back a few years now. I guess probably 7 or 8 years of being friends, and she guided me along the way of kind of working with art therapy. So she's been a voice in my life for a few years now. So thanks for joining me today, Deb.
Hey, I'm really excited about it, Aaron. This is my first podcast, so I really appreciate you being brave, that Marine bravery to let me on and to invite me. And I also appreciate everyone that's out there listening. You don't know me from Adam, but you're taking some time to listen to me talk. I appreciate that as you listen to our conversation. Just let me know, Aaron. I can give just a little bit of a spill about me so that people can kind of have some sort of a picture of who I am.
Do it.
I'm getting a go ahead. All right, so I'll take that hill on there. So I'm a Texas gal. I'm born and raised in Texas. Of course, if you're from Texas, that's the first thing you're probably going to start with. I grew up in a rural area near a lake. We had rolling hills of grass and clover. Of course, not during the worst of the summer, but during the spring. And I love um, everything about the land except for, of course, the stickers that we had a bad case of. But anybody in Texas would know those too, and probably anywhere else in like Oklahoma and so forth. I love nature and animals, open skies, far land that you can see far and wide. I was blessed with two loving parents. My dad's work required him to be away from home often, but when he was home, he was always very much attuned to us. In my family, my granddad was a lifer in the Air Force, and my uncle served in the Air Force as a refueler captain. My other uncle was in the Navy on an aircraft carrier, just like my dad was. And my great grandfather was a lifer in the Army. So my family values were often the same as the military. Trust me, it does trickle down to the children. The parent is not the only one with an ethos. I'm a Christian. I have learned that through whatever you face, God does not always remove it, but He is always there through it. And you can trust me, this took a long while to come to that conclusion after a few major traumas in my own young adulthood. And I
Mm,
suppose the good, Aaron, that came from some of those traumas has been navigating me towards my profession, which is a counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor with Forged Hope Counseling and Consulting in North Richland Hills, Texas. I work with trauma. I've been EMDR trained and CPT trained and all those other trainings that tend to work really well with trauma, and something you touched on with is which is expressive creative arts. So I utilize
yeah.
those as well as sand tray. In other words, I meet the person where they're at.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks for letting us know a little bit more about you. Yeah, we've did some expressive art activities together that were really eye-opening and paradigm shifting for me. So that's why I decided also to try my hand at that with pottery and some other watercolors and stuff like that. But yeah,
Yeah, I've always
so
enjoyed your work too, seeing what you've been able to create and how you've worked
yeah,
with people as well to help them, just keep passing it along to others.
yeah, yeah. I try and make it easy, accessible, easily accessible financially, accessible, like being available to people. So, but yeah, we're going to talk today. This is Rabbit Holes, and we're going to talk about trust to start off with because I let Deborah pick a topic, and I don't know, I see a lot of rabbit holes here.
Yeah, we're just going to hunt those rabbits, aren't we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
when
mean,
you yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you first. Go on.
Oh,
I'll
I was
follow.
going to say, what comes to mind for me when it comes to trust is it's like a currency of relationship. I mean, you only get it when you have earned it. A certain with between two people, for instance. Like if I'm nice and reciprocal and kind of mature and healthy and kind to you, then you're going to learn to kind of expect that from me. And and if I tell you something, then you're going to just believe me and trust me because I earned it by being trustworthy up to this point. Ideally, I mean, we trust people when it's not appropriate the wrong people, right? That's how we get trauma. That's how we get all kinds of problems. But yeah, I always saw it's interesting thought of trust as currency of a good, healthy relationship. And what do you think about that?
I go right along with that. I know one of the things I was thinking about when I was saying about trust is, and I think it coincides with it, but it's actual an animal story. I don't know if that's okay. I mean, a lot of people, we can really connect to our pets, right? Many people, I think, out there have a pet, and it's one that they already gave trust to because they've seen that acceptance, that respect. There's respect given or acceptance. Now, some people may say, you don't know my dog or you don't know my cat. There's no respect there, right? But they may need boundary lines set. But I was thinking, I had a situation a long time ago in my early adulthood. I was about 18, I was 19, I just turned 19, far away from home. I was in Washington State and I was working up there. I was feeling kind of down. I was having some things that I was going through and I really understood the word trauma. And so
Mm,
I went to a shelter because I thought I think I'm just going to get look and see if there's a companion for me to just that I can give back to that can also give back as well. And so I
yeah.
went out there and I looked at the shelter and there were dogs ready to come through these and just begging, clawing at the gates and everything like that. And I thought, oh, that's just a little too much energy for me, especially where I'm at right now. And there was this one dog. She was part Alaska Malamute and part Shepherd. So she looked like a white Shepherd, really. But she had a lot of thick fur like the Malamute for the cold winter and also had what I would call snow pads. It's where their paws or snow paws, where the hair, actually their fur, grows through down through the where the digits are, where their paw pad is, the bottom pad, but keeps kind of growing kind of long and straggly so that it actually makes traction on ice or
Mm,
snow. And
okay.
so, yeah, so similar to your beard, if you were to slide on your chin, you're just
I
showing
haven't
me.
tried it.
I thought I'd just break it apart, like just break it up a little bit with that. But anyway, so I got her, and she was very, just you could just see in her eyes. She was looked at me like, "Who cares? No one's gonna choose
Yeah.
me. I'm just gonna lay here." There was defeat,
Mm,
and I chose her. And so I took her, and she had actually had like an upper respiratory, so she was probably not feeling well too. But she's always somewhat like that, just a little on the reserve side. But I took care of her. I held her a lot. There was a lot of trust happening between us. And I think that's something important, like what you hit on, where there's some earning of trust there. When I petted her, I felt whelps, big, thick whelps all down her
mm,
spine or hips, and so apparently she had been abused. So it was a miracle,
mm,
really, that she wasn't aggressive or fear aggressive with me. But together we decided to work through our traumas at trusting each other and giving trust.
mm,
And she stayed by my side so much that if I was out and a cat ran by, she did not run after it. She stayed by my side. Probably the shepherd
mm,
in her on that part. But I like to hike, and I was out with a friend that was hiking with me, and we were in Washington State. There's something called the ice caves. And so if there's somebody from Washington State, they're going to go, oh, I know right where they were at. And so I'm assuming, being a Texas girl, not knowing much about ice and snow and so forth, that the ice came from, because it would be there all year long, like even in the summer, it came from maybe avalanche above and then it just kind of formed. And with the wind blowing a certain way and all that, it had that hollowness. And so it was a cave you could go into that was made of solid ice. And the top of it was solid ice, like a slope kind of coming down, but the sides of it had some, of the rock of the mountain and the cliff, and when it wasn't winter time, those were completely no ice. There was no snow or ice on it, so you had the ability to walk on those rocks if you could get to them. And my friend was, I would say, part mountain goat, was able to just like hop across all these things and probably had better gear
yeah.
than I did. And so he went up the top of the slope and then went over to the boulders that make up the cliff side and was on the safe end, as in there's no more ice. And I thought, well, another family value, anybody in the military kind of knows you don't want to be an expenditure to someone or hold them back. So you hold your own. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking I need to do this. So I go rather than thinking about limitations. And I get up on that slope part and realized I had cheap tennis shoes from the store, hardly any grip on them, any tread, and they iced over. And so
Mm.
the bottom of my shoes were basically ice. I happened to have picked up a like a stick or something to make as a walking stick. It was big, just more entertaining, and it was probably 2 inches diameter. But thankfully, I had it because I just jammed it right into the ice and held on to it. And then, like being a skier at the top of a slope, I felt my feet start to slide back and apart, and I would try to scoot them back up. And I was thinking the whole time, what am I going to do? Because when I looked behind me at the bottom, it would be like a ski slope. And when I'd hit the edge of that ice cave or the entry of the ice cave, I'd be flying off the top of it and into jagged rocks below.
Mm.
And I thought this is not a good setup, and now it's a point of no return. And my mind was racing, thinking about what can I do this, what can I do that. I can't take the stick out because as soon as I do, I'm sliding. Could I break the stick into certain pieces and just kind of stick it along? I'm trying to think of ways. And my dog Shasta came up and sat behind me and just plopped her rear end right behind me and leaned against me. And all of a sudden I realized I'm stabilized. And I thought, well, that was daggone smart. And then I was thinking, okay, I'm stabilized. And then I noticed something that I have to say, she was like God's angel to me. How this dog ever thought of this, I will never know unless God just imputed it to her. But she scooted one hip at a time. You could just feel the slight scoot of her bottom as she pressed
Yeah.
against my back side, and you could tell that she was scooting towards the boulders.
Mm.
So I thought, all right, I'll go with that. Again, trust. I'm thinking I'm just going to have to trust her to be smart because I can't get myself out of this situation. So
Yeah.
sometimes we have to trust when we need help. Sometimes, now hopefully it's with people that we can trust and we've earned trust, but there may be times in a person's life where they need help and other people haven't had that time to earn the trust, but you may have to reach out to someone,
Yeah.
professional or something like that and give a little trust. So anyway, we're scooting across and she's scooting and I just scoot along with her. I just follow her lead. And she got me clear over to the side where the boulders were. No ice, no snow. My friend was up on the boulder going, my gosh, I don't even think as a mountain goat they ever thought, oh, I need to go back and save somebody. Or maybe they didn't realize what all was transpiring and kind of watching what all was going on. But it was one of those miracle events. And so I was
Mm.
very thankful for her. So I always looked at that as she had saved my life. I saved her, from a shelter. She saved
Yeah.
my life out hiking. So you never know, too. You might be there when you give trust to save someone's life. You don't know how far it'll go. You don't know how far it'll carry. They may be there to save yours. You're not an island of yourself. So I learned those major points is that we're not an island to ourselves, and sometimes, we do absolutely need
Yeah.
somebody to be there for us.
Yeah. I had a thought. Well, I had a few thoughts. I'm writing down over here some of my thoughts, but like, when I was thinking about what they say, because I'm a mentor at the Veteran Treatment Court in Denton County, and the judge all the time says, "We trust, but we verify." And I think about you and Shasta on that ice, and like you you didn't trust at first. You were like, "What is she doing?" But then like
Yeah.
you verified that she's moving in the right direction, and she's helping you, and then you trust it. And so we kind of verify a little bit, and then we trust. So that's one thing I thought about. Another thing I thought about, and you can pick either of these, or we can go on a different rabbit hole. But then sometimes I don't trust people very much, but I trust God, and I trust the way that things work. You can have an evil intentioned person that's, trying to do me harm perhaps. And, I just trust God to take care of me. And I mean, and that allows me, I look past them, and I guess I just trust God. And by looking past them, like, I trust them too. It's the weirdest thing. And then they act like a better person, you know. In that sense, if you treat somebody like they're a good person, then they generally will keep acting like a good person. I don't know. Anyway, there's some different thoughts. What do you think
Well,
about any of
yeah.
that?
I was thinking about how you say about God. I think there's definitely one of the things I learned with God is that his thinking is so far above mine that I can pretty much naturally say that since we're in the world today and the world's not perfect and therefore we aren't either, that there's that part where we're not going to think as clear or as wisely. And so sometimes when I think, well, God, you should have X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean that he should have.
Right.
Because if I had his mind and could see all, know all, every aspect of it, I would follow what he would do.
Yeah.
But down here, I had a really wonderful story told to me once, and I've just never forgotten it. So, in regards to God, since you brought him up, and like I said, I am a Christian, but this can go a lot with trauma because oftentimes when we go through trauma, we can go, especially I find that the people most hurt in trauma when it comes to being upset with God have the most faith in him because it's like you
Mm.
could have done something about that. You have all power. Why didn't you? Sort of thing. And it's really hard too to understand, why some evil can exist. You know,
Right.
sometimes we forget how evil got brought into this world, and so God is just as much as he is merciful and loving. So we have to also be aware of that. But backing up to it, I heard a story about, and I don't know, I know that Jill probably has done stuff like this. Other people out there are going to know what I'm talking about. If you don't, you can try it and then you'll find out what I'm talking about. But when you do cross stitch or you do any type of artwork with stitches, thread and so forth,
I've done knitting.
well, this is where it's actually on a not canvas like paint canvas, but they
Right.
call it canvas, but it's a material.
Sure.
And so it's actual sewing, whether it's an embroidery or cross stitch. But what
Okay.
happens is when you're doing it, there's going to be loose threads underneath what you're working on, the beautiful picture you're working on. So you're looking down, you may have your material in it's called a frame hoop, and it's a wooden frame, and you tighten it so the tension holds the material real taut. And they're sitting there and you're doing all this stitching, and this is a beautiful scene of a mill and a house and water and all these things and flowers and everything. But when you look underneath, if you turn it upside down, there is strings hanging out everywhere. They're crossing each other in all sorts of zigzags. You will not see the picture you're working on. And
Right.
so I had heard a story about, and a man told it, and he said he used to sit playing with his cars at his grandmother's knees, and she would sit in the chair and she would, do her embroidery. And a beautiful scene like that I described to you. And when he would look up, he'd think, poor grandma, she is making such a mess. That looks so ugly. I would not want to tell her. Well, when he stood up after playing, because he's getting hungry, wanted snack time, and grandma's milk and cookies or something sweet. And he stood up, he looked down at what she had been creating, and he saw this beautiful work of art. Just, he could make out all the scene pictures of, the fence line and the grass and the rolling hills and etc. in the house, so forth. And he likened it to how we look at things from our perspective on earth. We look up or underneath what God is working on and we go, you are making a mess. Look at those hanging strings. That's not making sense. It's not connecting. Look at all the zigzags. What is that mess of color? Nothing's making sense. But if we were looking down at it from his perspective, it would be a beautiful work of art. And so
Sure.
there's a trust that you give with your life in that. So I think to me, when you were talking about it, you hit on that aspect of trusting God to know better. The having an objective viewpoint. I got another funny story, Aaron, that would go with that, having an objective viewpoint. You want
Tell
me to
it.
tell it? You're going
Tell
to
it.
tell it? Okay, people are going to really appreciate this one because how many of you out there have a sibling? Worse yet, an older sibling. But some of you older siblings are going, no, you got to know my younger sibling. Well, all of you probably get an idea from this. But my brother is 6 years older than me, okay? And like I said, Dad traveled a lot. So my brother took on some of Dad's leadership, especially in the role with me and him being the older brother. And I hated that because I had to do what he said and things like that. Well, my dad had purchased a bicycle for me. And my brother, he had learned on an old bicycle. And his view is you fall till you no longer fall. And with me, Dad, I guess, coddled me being the girl in the family. And so he put training wheels on my bike. Now, you have to understand, even though Dad coddled me, my brother taught me many of his skills. I could play football. I could climb a tree. I knew how to kill a snake. We did live rural. And I knew how to even flush tarantulas out of a tarantula hole. I mean, I learned everything my brother had been teaching me. But one of the things I thought is, oh, look, I've got training wheels. I'm going to do this. Now, the road had gravel, so I wasn't going to get on it. And we had all the grass everywhere else except for we had a driveway. So I looked like a carousel going round and round and round. And my brother was getting sick of it, especially when I was doing it all the time. And then he started noticing something that I didn't notice because I was too fearful of taking those training wheels off. He noticed they weren't even touching the ground on my tight turns, anything. So he said to me, Dad's gone and everything like that, and he says to me, Deb, let me take those training wheels off, and you're not even using them. I said, oh, no, 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 I'm using them. So he said, I tell you what, I'll make you a bargain. Don't trust an older brother. But anyway, he said, I'll make you a bargain. He said, if you let me take the training wheels off, I will hold the back. Now, I had one of those banana seats, and so
Sure.
you had
Yeah.
that chrome ridge that kind of went over. And so he's going to hold that chrome ridge, and he's going to run behind me. I thought to myself, do you think you can keep up? And he's like, oh, yeah, sure I can. Well, he was a track runner. He was a football player. I thought he probably can. And I thought we wouldn't have to go too far. He'd let me stop. We're all set, right? So he says to me, he says, okay, I got him off. You get on. And he's holding it. I can feel him steady it with his hand. So I know he's there. He goes, start pedaling. I'm behind you. And I can hear him run. He goes, faster, faster. And so I'm pedaling faster. I'm thinking, he's going to kill himself. And then I hear from a far off distance, faster. I thought, how can you be a far off distance? So I turned my head. While I got my hands on the handlebars, I turned my head, and I see him 40 yards or something behind me at this point. It's like a football
Yeah.
field. And, of course,
It's like Dumbo with the feather.
Exactly. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm
Maybe
taking
that's
on
not a
that.
female
Now that I'm
appropriate
older,
story.
I'm taking on that shape. But no, I'm just teasing. So anyway, I've got my hands on the handlebar, and Aaron, because my head turned, guess what happened to my handlebars?
They
They
turn
turned
too.
with my head. And so I went into a ditch. I'm flipped over across as my bike stuck in a ditch. The rest of me's flying into the grass. Of course, he's laughing. He is my brother. And he's running up to me. And I'm mad as a hornet. I'm yelling at him. How could you dare think to break your word to me? Because we don't, that's another thing. You don't break your word. All right. So anyway, and he says, but Deb, you were doing it on your own. You just had to see that you could do it on your own. You didn't need me. You were doing it on your own, and the worst you got is just grass stains on your clothes and maybe some gravel in your knee and so forth, but you're okay. And I could tell that, and he said, I'm really proud of you that you tried it. Well, to hear your brother, who will never
You didn't
give
have a
free.
choice.
Well, yeah, I didn't have a choice, but he wasn't free to give compliments. So if I heard that compliment, I thought, is he saving himself? But I looked into his eyes and I could tell he really meant it. And I thought, I daggone did do that. And I got up and guess what I started doing? Riding my bike with never looking back on the training wheels. So now, the object of that lesson is this, besides don't trust your sibling to...
Make them
Don't
earn
trust...
it.
Make a note who you can and cannot trust. Probably not your sibling. No, I'm teasing. I will come back to that, though. But trust the person that you know will look out to protect you, to maybe see some things you don't see that you're blindsided on. Maybe
Yep.
you have to hear some hard truths. And that might be in your best interest. And nobody else is brave enough to give you hard truth. So take it and look at it and really look and apply and see if it can be applicable. So again, like you're saying, look from another angle, allow them to help guide you to see a different angle. Now, yes, some people are going to be toxic and they will take that as far as they can go. They can be like, I have all the right answers. Well, if they're telling you they know it all, that's probably a bad sign. And you'll need to set some boundary lines.
Right.
But trust does allow for setting boundary lines. Trust is saying, I trust you to keep my boundary lines. So you want to keep boundary lines. But if it's okay, I'll tag that other piece that I was going to bring in. Okay. I said don't trust your siblings. I was just teasing. One aspect, well, one aspect is, and we do this in counseling. I was trained with cognitive processing therapy with Strong Star Initiative in San Antonio. Love them. They are awesome. But they have this thing called the Trust Star. And it looks like a round circle that would be like if you thought about a circle, the sun circle, and then beams shooting off of it, like rays off of a sun if you were sitting there doing a child's drawing of the sun. And those rays, each one of those lines is starting from 0% trust, being right at the circle, to extending all the way out, being 100%. And what you can put on each one of those rays is a certain point of trust. You may trust someone with your finances. Let's say if something was, you were incapacitated, and you go, this person I trust with my finances 95%. I give a little 5%, but 95%. But they may be someone, the same person, you could write their name right in the center of that circle, the same person on a different beam of keeping secrets or confidentiality, you
Oh,
might
yeah.
go about 5%. So when you finish a star for each person, you can see that across the board, you trust everyone in your life, but you trust them different. Like,
Sure.
you can trust this one person with finances, this other person with your children, this other, to take care of your kids and make sure they don't just eat
Yeah.
fast food or whatever, and so forth. But you're still showing trust to each people. I hear someone say, I don't trust anyone. I bet you do. I could turn around and say, the person that you don't trust, do you trust that they will, hurt you because you've seen it before? Is that not some form of trust?
Yeah.
That you believe, they're sly as a fox. Maybe you go, this person, I wouldn't trust them with my money. They're sly as a fox. Well, you trust that they're
Yeah.
sly as a fox about 100%, but you don't trust them with your money because that's about at 5% or 0%. So again, it's helping people understand that you really do trust more than you think you do. But now the healthy way is to look at where you trust, what you trust with a person, and if you can fill up quite a few beams off of your star with one individual and get to the 90% pieces, you're blessed. You've got someone that has earned your trust and has kept respect. Always be cautious, though, that you're not just going, oh, you don't give a person 100% all the time because we're all imperfect. So we're not going to be able to keep 100% on everything. So you want to balance your view of trust, just like what you were
Mm.
saying, Aaron.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, you said something about trusting others with boundary lines. And, trust is earned, as we've been talking about. We kind of agree on that. And I'm thinking about like everything has changed for me when I learned how to trust myself. Because trusting myself is, I mean, I don't give, I don't even understand why some people come up to me and they talk to me and I don't even want to hear another word and I don't even interchange with them. I just walk away and I'm like, what was going on for me there? And it's because I trust myself and I care about myself. And I'm earning trust with myself, to the point where I've been telling other people, you got to work on your boundaries. But now I have to change that of like, if you can make yourself live by your boundaries, then everybody else will just follow your example. What do you think about that?
Well, unfortunately, I've met some toxic people that even if somebody models it, they
Mm,
will not follow in line. Now, that doesn't mean that, like what you say, the majority of people would see you have that trust in yourself and then would, most people are going to try to respect or have some form of like encouragement in what you're setting.
mm,
Most people don't want to take and what I found, most people don't want to harm your trust. But there are people, unfortunately, in the world, because it's an imperfect world, that may have some things going on in them, whether it's their fears, because like you said, you may be trusting yourself, but they
yeah,
may not be trusting their self and therefore
right.
not trusting you. So then they may not be able to follow the model even if they're wanting to follow the model
Mm,
because they have to work through some things that are deep down inside. Not that it's deeper than what you've worked through, but that they
sure.
haven't yet made those movements towards that.
Yeah.
Now, it can encourage them to make movements towards that, but I've seen sometimes where that may not work, only in
Mm,
toxic situations. But as
sure.
far as trusting yourself, I think you hit a powerful point. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of fears with, relationships and others because we don't have that part where we have been, I want to say, like the parent to ourselves. Sometimes there
Right.
can be things all the way back to childhood where
Right.
you haven't, and I know people go, oh, well, back to the childhood, blame whatever. But seriously, when do we first start learning about trust? That's in our first relationships. And so that can be as early as childhood. And so we may not have been where we've had healthy relationships modeled for us or given to us when we were children. And so then being able to grow to be that parent that we might not have had. We just might not have had that parent. And
Yeah.
but yet as adults we can know what that parent might should have looked like, because we've gone through school, we've seen other kids, we've seen other parents, we've watched some TV shows like Little House on the Prairie, and oh, look how good Pa is. So we've seen some things and can go, that would be a healthy parent. I wish I'd had that as a parent. And so then being able to nurture that part of ourselves that had missed that parental figure, so we kind of become our own parent, our encourager, our person like that. And then that confidence can allow us to maybe not fall prey to certain toxic
Yeah.
relationships because
Yeah.
we are okay with just being with ourselves. When you
Well,
run from yourself, you can run into a toxic relationship.
well, and I agree with you 100%. I was just thinking about, I'm sorry for interrupting, but I was thinking about
No,
parents and
you're
how they
good.
protect us. They're like, hey, talking to a girl, don't wear that to the football game on Friday night. Like, come back in here and change clothes. Why? Because they want to be party poopers? Maybe. But mostly because they know a teenage girl not wearing many clothes going to the football game is going to get attention of guys. Some of that might be healthy and useful. But most of that is going to be harmful and destructive. And it's like, wear this hoodie. And we arm them and we protect them, right? You're a parent just like me. We work on, helping our kids navigate hard situations before they get to them, but, for the most part. And so that way, too, we pick up that role for ourselves for protecting ourselves. Like, I got a bit bad feeling about that guy. I mean, one of the basic ways I do, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about this particular thing, but me and Jill, we don't go into alleyways at 3 a.m. in Detroit. You know what I'm saying? We go to bed at 10 o'clock. We save ourselves a lot of harmful situations and we protect ourselves. And we kind of settle in and we'll watch a show and, you know, fix some supper and we just stay in. And we've traveled all around America, and guess what? All we've seen are friendly people. I don't know if that'd be the case at 3 a.m. in the back alley somewhere. So, we're good parents to ourselves, and that's just something our parents would have said. Isn't that how role reversal kind of works? It's like you hear your mom come out of your mouth or whatever. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I hit a lot of rabbit holes. Pick any one you want.
No,
Is this Albuquerque? No, go ahead.
I took the kids this last weekend, just having some family time together, and we went to a bed and breakfast, and we stayed there. And we met at breakfast time to all eat, and they were very respectful. And they have baby faces; they take after me. So even though they're older, people assume they're younger. And one of the gentlemen that was waiting on us said, "Your kids are so respectful. They're so." Goodness, and he said, I have to tell you both, I just floor me that you show so much respect, and I just don't see that this day and age.
Sure.
And so he was asking about parenting things, and it came up, and my children said, which was nice because I wasn't, it's kind of like, well, I'm curious what they're going to say. But one of the things that kind of came up too is that one of the things both my husband and I, as parents, did is we told the truth to our kids.
Mm,
We made sure it was cognitively appropriate. There are different
right.
age ranges, and you have to be careful. There's many ways to say the same thing. Make it where it's cognitively okay for your child, but we still told truth. We made sure that we did not say something that was going to be off, and if they asked us, we answered. And that was a sign of respect to them as much as it was them respecting
Absolutely.
us too. And so we always wanted our children that we knew when they're going to be teenagers, it's going to be tough, like what you're mentioning, where it's wisdom pieces. And we wanted them to not need so much. They can be connected to their peers and talk to their peers, but not need their peers, is maybe being able to come back and know they can talk to us about anything and we will answer honestly. And so one of the things that was mentioned is that fact that they could trust that if we said there's going to be a consequence, there's going to be a consequence. We did not go
Sure.
back on our consequences. is. We did allow them to tell their side, their perspective, as long as they were respectful. And they said that too. And they said, but they can't imagine when they see kids, talking back to their parents, or, my son had worked at one place, and I won't name the business where it happened, but there was where child didn't get what they wanted, and they were kicking their parent. And so, at my children can't fathom where
Right.
the kid would even think of that. That's called respect. Not what the kid was doing, but my children going, how do you do that? That means I respect my parents, and we showed them respect too. It's important to give that respect. Now, respect does not mean being permissive.
Right.
Respect means I want you to grow and make decisions, and wise decisions. So I'm going to give you opportunities to make wiser decisions, but I'm also going to give you the consequences if you don't
Right.
make wise decisions. That's
Sure.
helping them grow. And so that's one of
Absolutely.
the, and that's like child play therapy too. Therapists that work with child play therapy, they're looking at decision making, responsibility giving. And so we did that, and we also were respectful with it. So I think respect is a big giant piece of trust. If someone's
Yeah.
not respecting you, how do you trust them?
Yeah. I like it.
So I think I just kind of went on that rabbit trail, and so any other
Good
rabbits
job.
are going to pop off? Okay.
You're a pro. You're a pro. No, it's perfect.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, who else knows? I mean, I'm the rabbit hole guy. It's my podcast. If I say it's good, that's good enough.
Okay, then I
Um,
can follow that.
there you go. Absolutely, Bo. Thinking about trust too, I thought about. I wonder what it would look like, and we're gonna go back to my counseling training, thinking about
Okay.
Rogers and unconditional positive regard, and like how we seek to provide an environment. Every counselor, to some extent, borrows some things from Rogers on building healthy relationship and unconditional positive regard, where you know where you treat others like you have no expectations of them in a way, in a manner, like you're surprised if they do something crazy and you're excited if they do something good or whatever. You're acting appropriately, like not expecting them to be a perfect person, but also not expecting them to be, toxic or hurtful. So it's interesting. I don't know. I just throwing that out there. I don't even have
Thrown out
like a
that rabbit hole.
conclusion.
Gee. Okay, so probably I would say my faith base throws a different direction a
Okay,
little bit on
that's
that.
fine. Go for it.
And so when I think about, because like I said, sometimes people are toxic. I do agree that if you meet them where they're at, but you have to find where they're at, that people can move towards something good. But people have choice. So I'm Adlerian in my guiding theory. You mentioned Rogerian, I'm Adlerian. People
Okay,
have
okay,
choice, and so I'm just going to kind of move Adlerian a little bit. People have
go
choice, and
for
in
it.
their choice, they may not, even in the best environment, do the right thing.
Mm,
And when I say the right thing, what I mean is something that is going to be helpful and beneficial to all and is respectful
yeah.
to all. So in that case, I think there can be a toxicity even if we make an environment enriched. Now, most likely they're going to move towards positive. Most likely they're going to make a positive choice. But I think that people still are able to decide, and because if we said we can create an environment, we're almost like behaviorists. If we say we can create
Sure.
a perfect positive environment, therefore you will do this, you will
Right.
act this way, then that's a behaviorist. Um, and
Right.
and although we can create again, it's an imperfect world, so we can't make a perfect environment. But although we can make a very, very good, conducive to positivity environment, I move away a little bit from the behaviorists and I say that people are a very unique,
Mm,
wonderful creation. And because they have that unique ability as being a creation that is designed with intelligence. And when I say intelligence, I mean we have shown we can do things above the animal kingdom.
sure.
So we're not
Every
just
day.
gonna, yeah. So right. So we've got that gift, but that gift is also decision making, and we can choose even when we know things are helpful, beneficial, whatever. We can still make a choice. You look at the Garden
Yeah.
of Eden. So we'll just throw out the Bible. You look at the Garden of
Okay.
Eden. You had it perfect, but somebody chose. Two people chose something that would turn a complete opposite destructive
Mm,
way. It had a destructive consequence, and they were not. Now, yeah, you hear about Eve being deceived, but they knew that God said don't do it. They did know that.
right.
And they moved against that even in a perfect state. So that's where
Yeah.
I go, you can set up as much as you can, but people still have, and that's why I lean towards Adlarian, because it does allow for that decision making.
Yeah.
People can still, in their autonomy, go a different way. Whatever their reasons are, they can create their own reasons within themselves, because in a way they're a world of themselves within a world. And even though this world can be everything, they're still a world within themselves.
Yeah. And man, I'm trying to remember everything I know about Adlerian is kind of rushing into my brain. But when I think about it, I think about what. Now you correct me if I'm wrong. There was like the main fears that guide humans: fear of the unknown, fear of freedom, and a few other fears. I think there was like four of them. Or do I got the wrong theory?
I'm not sure if you're existential on that.
Well, maybe that is existential. Well, I guess I don't look so smart after all. But let's take.
No,
But I
no, you're
wanted to.
okay. You at least had a theory. You were on the.
I remembered something from my books at college. But no, I was thinking about fear, and you mentioned fear a little bit ago, and you
Huh?
mentioned it again
Yeah.
here, and I think that fear is something we've talked about on the podcast a lot, but it really short circuit some of our best intentions sometimes, and you can get people acting crazy when they're afraid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
fear is it's big business. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody's using fear to get more money out of us, like soaking us like sponges, getting all so I was thinking that maybe the short circuiting factors of fear is what makes somebody toxic. We reject people because we're afraid we're going to be rejected. We attack people because we want to be preventive. Hoorah, Marine Corps. We want to be preemptive. We attack them before they can attack us. And, when in a weak moment. And so it's like this, it's fear, it seems like, that causes people to have kind of a random,
Mhm.
short circuited kind of negative perspective and action. What do you think?
Mhm. I go with that. And the other thing, have you ever noticed, Aaron, fear doesn't get eradicated. I remember when I was in my psychology, my bachelor's, because my bachelor's is in psychology. Not my master's, but my bachelor's. And I remember that one of the things as we were learning with the behavior theory and so forth is that fear cannot be completely eradicated. Now, you can have damage to certain parts of your brain and maybe not have fear, where certain networks are not working correctly, and therefore there's like an absence of it. So, yes, there is that kind of thing that can occur. But if the brain is functioning and networking, there is fear. And even if you look at people with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's so unfortunate that as things start to as the brain starts to get less and less, or like what am I trying to say, like not as functional,
Diminish?
as the lose the functionings and start to decline is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, it took me a minute to think the word. But anyway, decline, then what they still can have that basic emotions of fear and anger,
Mm,
and fear be one of the last things, so
yeah.
become fearful, agitated, things like that. So it's important to see that, like I said, I keep coming back to it. It's an imperfect world. And part of an imperfect world is fear. Again, that follows the line of my faith. I'm not going to go off of my faith. I don't push my faith. If people come, their values, I'm going to listen to their values. So I'm not going to push my values, but I'm going to be aware to, where they're coming from and so forth. But one of the things that I see is, matching some of the things that I've grown up in my faith on is that it's an imperfect world, and the imperfect world has fear in it. And that fear came in, you know. Uh, so I think it's because, again, I know that a lot may watch this that are Christians, and so I'm going to tag in this. When you think about the story, as you know, of Adam and Eve, they were ashamed, but what did they do? They went and hid.
Right. They
That
were
kind of
afraid.
shows some level of, exactly, that shows some level of fear. So fear came in early, and it stayed pretty consistent with the human race.
Yeah.
And so I think it's understanding. I think it helps the person to understand what they are afraid of. Look at the deepest fears. I do that with what's called downward arrow when I work with people, especially with trauma, is starting to look at, again, not giving them all the answers or anything like that, but looking at what is going on for them. As in, what does that mean to you? If you're afraid of such and such, what does that mean to you? If that is so, what does that mean to
Yeah.
you? And then they tell, and then, okay, what does that say about you? If that is so, if that is true, what does that say
Right.
about you? And so downward
Sure.
arrow tends to use those two questions back and forth until you go as far down as you can get with your, as for the client, as far down as they can get with their answers. And then they can see something. Sometimes, just to give you an example, people might get down to, well, if it's true, then it's not, then I have no worth, or I'm
Right.
unworthy, or I shouldn't exist, or things like
Right.
that. And that seems to be a common
Okay.
comment that can come up at the very bottom of a downward arrow. And that may be something, again, like you mentioned about fear, that may be a fear that people have, is the unworthiness, shouldn't exist sort of thing, or if I don't do something, I shouldn't exist, or if I have done this, I shouldn't exist. So there's things like that that come up with trauma.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of negative, right? I don't want to talk about all negative stuff.
Well,
So I'm
let's
going to
pull a
switch it.
positive out.
Well, I'm going to switch it over to, I've been thinking about this other term, and it's something. It's a highly prized compliment for guys, for Marines, but even for women, for kids. We say they're fearless, right? This is like they see fear. And I'm sorry, I've got to confess, I'm coming on the tail end of a really good speaker that I experienced last week that talked about fearless and being fearless, and he talks about Gideon's story. And if you're not familiar in Judges, I know you are probably, but if the listeners aren't familiar, you can look it up in Judges. But it's just interesting. And I thought, what would life look like if I was completely fearless? And so it's my personal journey. I mean, obviously, none of us will ever get there, but I'm starting to take apart, the layers of being fearful. And, there's fear at every level. But here's the crazy thing that I read in a book, and you can tell me what you think about this. I read in a book, it's talking about when you come in contact with fear, you don't listen to it, you don't do what it says. I mean, you don't listen to it and do what it says, but you listen to it, you sit down with it, you have a conversation because there is something in there that's important that is trying to tell you. I mean, there's a lot of things like it's irrational sometimes. The emotions are running wild. We can go into worrying. We can go into so many other kind of directions that may not be healthy. But like, just this is what I heard, and I've tried it a few times. Like sitting down with my fear and saying, "Hey, I know you're trying to protect me, but you're actually trying to kill me too." Like can I just get the protection part and not get the, killing part, run off the cliff because I'm in danger, or anything? So yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. What do you think about being fearless?
I think that's cool. I think it's neat that you ever hear the word "iron sharpeneth iron."
Yeah, of
We've had
course.
that phrase, a friend, iron sharpeneth iron, and I think it comes up with how we're doing this. Talking back and forth, because I look at fearless as courageous. Maybe it's just a semantic, but when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, you remember John Wayne? He had this saying of fear, how's it? Courage or bravery is when you're afraid but you saddle up anyway. And when I think about your
Okay.
story of Gideon, he actually put out a fleece a few times because he wanted to know God was going to be with him. It wasn't that he went, he didn't go, I'm not afraid. He was like, I want to know how I can not feel fearful.
Right. Right.
And so, in that way, I think he had to see that he could trust God. For Gideon to go out, and especially, he wasn't all that comfortable with getting those soldiers whittled down either, and how they were going to do it with the trumpets and so forth. And anybody that's really
Yeah.
interested, this is probably piquing your interest. Just go to Judges; you'll be able to read about it. It's not actually a military tactic that most
Right.
military would do. What Gideon was going to do was actually going to be considered not military wise,
Right.
and he wanted to know everything's going to be okay. Matter of fact, Deborah's the one that goes, go for it in there. That's why I like that story.
Yeah.
The thing too, I think, is we circle back. Did you notice to trust? So
Okay.
fear is something that may be there, kind of like John Wayne saying, "Saddle up anyway," and kind of like you going, "Hey, fear, I know you're doing this stuff, whatever." Where John Wayne's like, "Saddle up anyway," and the Marines probably have saddled up plenty of times when they've been
Yeah.
afraid. I'm pretty sure, and when I say afraid, I know it's fearless. I think it's go like that John Wayne piece. You may still feel some apprehension in there, but you're moving forward. And I
Yeah.
think Gideon sat there, you're trusting. You're trusting something. You're not going to go out and do what you're being told to do unless you trust something. You're going to trust your gun to do something. You're going to trust your battle buddy to do something. You're trusting something to
Yeah.
get out and do that. And so I think that in a way, trust begins to decline fear. And
Mm.
for Christians and hopefully others moving towards trusting God, trusting in God can really, that's why fear not, be not dismayed. I'm thy God, I will be with you. I hold you in my right hand, Isaiah says, 42:10. So there's that piece of at some point I have to
Yeah.
let go and trust.
Well, and I also think this takes us back to trust too. Perfect love casts out all fear. And as you develop your relationship with yourself and with God and with others, like as you develop this trust and you just got trust everywhere, it casts out, your fears. Like, yeah. But I also thought of a new Latin term I learned. I'm going to try out here
Okay.
because it's insterquillet invenitor. And it means, well, I don't know exactly word for word what it means. It was quoted to me. But what it basically means is if you want to grow the most, go where you have the most fear and then walk through it. When I've heard this too, I didn't come up with this, but like everything you want in life is on the other side of fear. And you got to kind of stand up and keep taking baby steps forward. And the fear says, it's useless, it's worthless, it's never going to work. And you just keep baby stepping your way through. And those baby steps add up. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I lost you a few bits and pieces. I don't know. My internet, I'm going to apologize to everybody. My internet sometimes can be off a little, and it was freezing a little bit before we started. So I hope it's not freezing when I'm speaking now. But so when you're saying about that, where, yeah, I think obviously fear can make a person where they're motionless. You
Right.
can remember there's
Isolated.
fight, flight,
Yeah.
right. There's fight, flight, and freeze and fawn. And if you're not flying away from whatever, and you're not fighting through whatever, you're freezing.
Right.
So there can be a time where you go like you were stating, where there is no use, you freeze. Your body's just like I've got to just decompress. I've got to regulate. I'm frozen here because there's nothing I can do. And I think that a person can work themselves basically into a corner with
Mm.
fear. They can let fear become their chains and their bind them. But like I said, and I think we both have been stating this, fear is there. People live with it. Whether it's they're afraid that they're not good enough at work, or whether they're not important enough, or whether they're not lovable enough, or whatever, there's fear somewhere down in there. Fear is just a part of life on this earth. As long as we're living, and so in this body. So fear, as long as we're living in this body, fear is going to be something that happens. But I think what I'm hearing you say is that you can move through fear. You can move, it may follow you, it may add some things, but the more that you understand about why your fear is there and what you're fearing, the more
Yeah.
you can come on the positive swing.
Right.
Hopefully if you're looking towards change and positive change, you can go on a positive swing and start to go, all right, is this really true? Because there's something about fear that isn't always truth. If we put a lot of trust in our fear, we're putting a lot of trust in a sleight of hand, in
Right.
a mirror that's not clear. We're seeing ourselves through the fear mirror, and it's like a
Yeah.
funhouse mirror. It's not a clear picture of who we are.
I like
And
that.
so, so we have to, again, going back to my faith, I look at, for myself, I look at God helping me see myself
Yeah.
in a more clear image. So I try to have him be the mirror for me than my
Sure.
fears. But I know not everyone's going to believe like me. So I would say look at and see, is that a funhouse mirror image that you're seeing in yourself when you're
Right.
feeling afraid? Or is that, how much reality is it? When we do CPT, cognitive processing therapy, we do where eventually a person's fear, so to speak, or what's the worst thought that they have, their negative cognition, we start to have them become their judge and jury and witness and everything. They get to be the whole
Sure.
court case, and they put
Yeah.
that negative cognition out there in the court and see if it can stand.
Yeah.
If it has enough evidence. And yeah, some people have some evidence. There might be some evidence to your fears. I mean, you don't just all of a sudden just have it. If you've been burned on a stove, you can have a fear of hot stoves when the stove's on. But then
Yeah.
you might have the question of, yeah, but is the stove always hot? No. Okay, now we can cut back on the evidence. Will you burn your hands every time you touch a stove? No, not if it's not on. So
Right.
then it
I like
becomes
that.
more balanced, more
Yeah, for
balanced.
sure. Well, and I like what something you said, and we've got to kind of start wrapping up. But like we were talking about, you said something about being aware of your fear and like talking about it, counseling, in a safe environment, and discovering, well, I get afraid when I do this, and I have fear when I do that, or whatever. And maybe you can agree with this or not, whichever seems to fit. But I think like once you're aware of your fear, it's like being aware of subconscious things happening for you. When you become aware of it, then you're no longer controlled by it. What do you think
I
about
think
that?
awareness is a key. I agree with that. You have to have that awareness. And I think that's why when we were talking even in the beginning about trust, where, sometimes you could trust those that have earned your trust to be able to give you help you if you're blindsided or something. And Aaron
Sure.
brought that up too. You brought that up too with wisdom, where you can trust those people to give you wisdom, to be there for you, to help with your awareness of your environment that you're in and stuff like that, and then having that, and the funny story of my brother and everything like that, again, having some trust in people helping you see things. And then you have to, and Aaron, I think too, we go back to that trust piece, is that, like, trusting that it isn't 100% all bad, that yes, you may
Right.
have fear, you may have things, but can we call that human? Can we just
Yeah.
normalize it? Let's just
Yeah.
normalize it. And that's what we've been talking about today. Both you and I agree this is a human factor, that fear is going to be
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
But then how do you respond to your fear? And again, that's with, like you said, Aaron, trusting yourself, also trusting others, also, if especially if you have faith-based, trusting God, and being able to develop that trust. And if it means some boundary lines, because unfortunately some people will make decisions that are not healthy, that can cause
Yeah.
harm. Or if it means, and your boundary lines can also increase their ability to earn trust. So you're giving them a gift with boundary lines so that they can also earn trust and then therefore do that with others. So it's a gift. So anyway, I think we did a complete circle. Our rabbit trail, we caught our rabbit. We went all through the digging and came right back to the first hole that the rabbit ran down. And I think that just shows our skill together, that we can do, that
Yeah.
we can pull it together, you know?
Awesome. And man, you summed it up perfectly. All I can do now is say thank you, and thank you for being on the program. Thanks everybody for listening, and thank you, Deborah.
I just felt like all of a sudden going, happy trails to you until we meet again.
I mean, if you had fun,
So
I had fun, and the
I
listeners will
did.
have fun. So we're gonna have to have you
Hopefully they
back
did.
now. We're gonna have to have you
Well,
back
we'll
sometime.
see. They may go,
Okay.
gosh, don't have that woman back. But if they say, oh, that was fun, just holler at me. We'll do another
Okay.
Elmer Fudd and What's Up, Doc, and have Bugs Bunny heading down another trail.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, we'll
All
talk to you
right.
later. Bye.
Okay, bye all.